What's up, y'all? My name's Leticia, and you're listening to Confessions from the Closet, a podcast all about vulnerability and overcoming. It's time we get ourselves unstuck from these boxes and these closets that we've allowed ourselves to be trapped in. We're so much bigger than these boxes we've been in. It's time we go deep, y'all. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another week of Confessions from the Closet. I am so excited about today. I have one of my new friends who I have just admired his work for so many years, and now I get to call him friend on today. I'm excited to have him share his story on something that changed my life and helped me so much. I have Timothy Kurek. Kurek? Did I say it right?
Yeah, Kurek.
Kurek, author of Cross in the Closet, which I talk about every week almost, it feels like. And so I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
That. I appreciate it.
Yes.
No problem.
I can't get enough of just the idea behind the book. So I'm really excited that you're here to share your story.
At some point I'm going to have to write a follow-up, though.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be a little bit different. So.
Yeah. That's good. So the first thing I really want to ask, and I kind of ask everyone this, is when and how did you come to know Jesus, have faith, and what was that like? What was it like, and how old were you really?
Well, I was raised in the church, but I was raised in a really hyper-conservative Christian denomination, independent Baptist, with pastors that were graduates of Bob Jones University and Pensacola Christian College, which, for those who don't know, Bob Jones didn't even allow interracial dating until 2001. So
wow.
It was a pretty hardcore upbringing, and I did the whole 6-year-old confessional come to Jesus moment in Sunday school. I think I actually came to Christ though at 18 or so, around there, when I started finally poking some holes in the dogma and started to interact with Jesus. And have a relationship with Jesus, but it still was several years until I felt like I really encountered Jesus. So it's still going.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Right. It should be. So one thing I was looking at when I was just looking at old interviews of yours was someone had asked, they asked, when did you first start believing that being LGBT was wrong? What was that story like?
Well, I read about this early on in the book. I remember being in Sunday school when I'm tiny. I can't remember exactly what age, but I was tiny, and we had the teacher was up with this cloth felt board that she used to stick cloth felt pieces to that would never stick.
Yeah.
And we always laugh about it, but one lesson was on Sodom and Gomorrah, and that was the first time I had heard any anti-gay rhetoric specifically in the church. But I was probably 6 or 7 years old at the time, and then that anti-LGBT sentiment was encoded almost into the DNA of my religious faith. I like to differentiate between my religious faith and my actual faith.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as long as I can remember, as long as I've considered myself a Christian up to that point, I had believed it was an abomination, unnatural, a sexual sin, not anything involving identity or who you were created to be, that kind of thing. So
yeah. It's crazy that it happens so young. I'm just like, wow, my daughter's 10. I'm really thankful that's not something. Obviously, we wouldn't be in that church. It wouldn't work out.
Yeah. Well, it was 30 years ago, so thankfully some things have changed. Not enough things have changed, but some things have changed.
Definitely.
So,
so I wanted to just talk more about the book. So you were at karaoke with one of your friends, and she came out to you. Yeah. And this is how the whole journey started. So can you tell me about that a little bit? Yeah,
that was the inciting incident for me.
Yeah.
So my best friend Josh, who is still my best friend to this day, I was hanging out with him the other day. He started going to this little dive bar called Springwater. And if you're familiar with Nashville, Tennessee at all, it's right next to Centennial Park behind the McDonald's. And it was a speakeasy during Prohibition. And now it's just still a total dive bar. But on Tuesday nights, they had what we ended up jokingly referring to as lesbioke, because there was a pretty heavy population of LGBT folks in there. But he started bringing me to that, and I found this amazing community of people that were loving and non-judgmental, and pretty much the opposite of everything that I had been around all of my life.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that bar. I fell in love with singing Tenacious D songs with my buddy, and the community we had that extended outside of that bar, and all the regulars. There was a pretty core group of regulars that attended. A young woman started attending. She was there probably about 6 weeks in a row hanging out, and I had a crush on her. I thought she was adorable, and she pulled me out on the patio one day, and I was hoping that it was that moment for me to flirt with her finally. But she said that she had heard that I was a Christian, and she said, how can you be a Christian? And the hairs raised up on the back of my neck. I started feeling myself getting defensive, and I was trying to figure out a way to answer her question. And before I could say anything, she broke down in tears, and she said, I came out to my parents, and my dad said that he wouldn't pay for the education, like room and board, of a faggot daughter. And her mom said, come back when you're fixed.
Wow.
And so as a result, she had to drop out of college, move to a different state. And in that moment, the reason it was the inciting incident was, I had never seen that level of rejection firsthand. For a lot of LGBT folks, it's either part of their personal, history and narrative, or they've known somebody who would be able to tell that same kind of story. But being as sheltered and living in this bubble that I was living in, it was never something I was personally witnessed. And I found myself in that moment more angry at her parents for not explaining it to her the right way. Like they could have somehow made her know she was an abomination without making her feel like an abomination. Yeah. And, I was not present in that conversation. I was not, or in that situation. And I had this precious young woman crying on my shoulder, and all I was thinking about was what the little religious voice that had been programmed into me was telling me to say, and how to convert her, and how to save her. And as soon as she left, I felt a real aha moment. It was like one of the first times I felt like God spoke to me. I write it about a little bit more generically in the book, but I feel like it was probably one of 2 or 3 instances in my life where I felt like God was like, hey, so that voice you just listened to, that wasn't me. We're going to have to fix this. And thus the journey began.
Wow. That's crazy. So did you feel like he called you to do it, or was that just something that you decided this makes sense?
I felt like he called me to do it. No, I mean, I'm always hesitant to, say anything I'm doing is God told me to do this or God told me to do that. But it was a very personal whisper in my ear that I very much feel was the Holy Spirit.
Totally. So then you embark on this journey, which is totally the whole book. But you decided to literally walk a mile or a year in her shoes.
Well, as literally as I
literally.
can.
I mean, you did walk in. I read it as a brand new out of the closet person, and I mean, it helped.
Well, I got to be sensitive.
Well, and that's I probably say all the wrong things sometimes. I'm like, I don't know that I'm politically correct all the time, but I try my best. And so that, as a brand new person out of the closet, your story and your willingness to come out to your whole family as you were gay and try to understand and have empathy in a way that I've never seen anyone do for this community. It meant everything to me. Just I shared.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, no,
Oh, you're good. I shared the book with my mom. I know I gave it to her, and I think I even tried to give it to other people that were in my circle at that time, because I was just like, if they could just understand it from your perspective because you never had to live that. So if you can tell me a little bit more about that journey and how you started it, really for the viewers. Obviously, I know the story, but I think it's so important.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that I realized after she left and I had this idea kind of forced on me in my brain that I was going to do this, I realized that there's no way I could ever understand what my friend was going through in feeling that rejection. But I did realize that I could understand for myself how that label of gay impacts so many people's lives, that once people identify you as that, if they're anti-LGBT or just, and believe it's a sin, they will almost forget about every other label that could be attached to you and just focus on that, hyperfixate on that one thing that they disagree with or are against. And I knew that, given the fact that I was a college pastor at the time, that it was gonna be an interesting experience, and that my super conservative religious family was gonna have a really hard time with it. But I knew that coming out and saying that I was gay, going into the closet as straight, so I could also kind of experience what denying self was like, and denying my identity was like, and get a glimpse of that too. I felt like, it was the only way that I could bypass, what I think would have ended up being 20 years of therapy and a bunch of, a much harder road than I even went through. So I made the decision. That was when she came out to me, that was June of 2008. So in January of 2009, I came out to friends or family first on day one, then friends day two, and then social media on day three. And I expected a lot of things. I did a lot of research, read books, accounts of people coming out, horror stories and positive stories, and spoke with people, made friends with Mel White of Soul Force and Jay Baker, Jim and Tammy Faye's son, who's become a friend, and asked them about all their experiences. And so I was expecting, 75 coffee invitations where people would proselytize. But the shocking thing was just the utter silence that I was met with. Martin Luther King Jr. said, in the end, it's not the words of our enemies we'll remember, but the silence of our friends.
Yeah.
And that silence was just absolutely deafening.
Yeah.
So I went from having this vibrant social life and community and religious family and everything to having almost every relationship in my life just ripped away from me, cut off as though I had died. And that was an eye opener. That was the first, kind of shoe to drop.
Yeah. Wow. So then you decided to immerse yourself in the gayborhood, as you call it in the book. And and what did you experience
it's
there?
Still there.
Yeah. It's still there.
Yeah, it is. I drove by it the other day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was in Nashville on Church Street, which I thought was appropriate.
Yeah.
I started going to church in the little gayborhood of Nashville, and I started going to a bar called Tribe. It was more business professionals, 21 and up, after work drinks and opportunities to socialize and make new friends. Started going there, and then I got a job at a cafe a few doors down that was attached to an LGBT bookstore called Revive Cafe. And so becoming a barista at that cafe was amazing, because then I wasn't just in a bar. I was in this cafe. I was hanging around families and kids and groups of adults, and ended up on a softball team in an LGBT softball league, which I was the absolute worst at. I mean, terrible.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be amazing, and I got schooled. But yeah, I mean, it was just, I decided that since my entire community had almost just rejected me overnight, that the only thing I could do was try to find a new community of people. And what I found was this environment where people, complete strangers, would begin to invest in me immediately.
Yeah.
There was no, let's wait and get to know you, hang out a few times before we're friends. I mean, these people became fast friends.
Yeah.
And I just started realizing that if I could just find a church that was like that, it would probably be a game changer. But I spent the majority of the year saying yes to every opportunity presented, like protesting in New York with Soul Force, putting on a marriage equality event in Memphis, Tennessee. As I said, the softball team.
Yeah.
I just wanted to experience as many different facets of the community as I could. I volunteered at Pride Day. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, was finding a new community and finding actual acceptance.
Yeah, that's just so important. So then you're living your life in the closet as a straight man, and everyone rejected you right away. So how did that year go with your family coming around? Did they come around? Did it get easier?
I think my mom came around more than anybody. I think, and I think my brother and sister-in-law had the most difficult time reconciling it, not because they were hateful or anti-me. They just didn't. They had been raised in similar backgrounds to me. In the case of my brother, the same background as me. And so I know it was a lot for them to chew on. I remember really vividly one night after I had gotten into an argument with my mom, where she had brought me coming out and thrown it in my face. And I was really ticked off at her. So I went down to the bar, and one of my childhood friends, a guy named Will, who is still friends with, he'll probably watch this later. Hi, Will. He was bartending there at the time while he was putting himself through law school. And he asked me why I looked so upset. And so I told him the whole situation, and I was expecting him to be simpatico and back me up and be angry at my mom. And having gone through similar experiences with his own mother, he stopped me dead in my tracks and said, "Hey, listen, she legitimately believes that her baby boy is going to hell.
Yeah.
Have some grace on her.
Wow.
Let her process this. Don't be a dick."
Yeah.
So, and so finding grace for the quote unquote enemy, for the other, was something that I hadn't experienced that either.
Yeah.
I'd never been told that LGBT folks, that the people who are marginalized in general tend to have a much more gracious outlook. Most of the time.
Yeah. That's crazy that he said that. I say this all the time. Like, I didn't realize how hard it was for my mom when I was coming out. But like now, 9 years later, I'm like, man, they have to come out too. So they have to process, like, you were this and then you are this all of a sudden. And especially for your mom, she definitely didn't see it coming because you are straight. Yeah. So it had to catch her off guard. But
she was expecting another marriage, more grandkids, and that kind of thing. And not to say that I couldn't have been in a healthy marriage and had kids, but her view of traditional marriage, seemed lost at that point to her, and I had to realize that she was grieving something as well. And thankfully, she ended up coming around quite a bit, and it's one of the more gracious people that I know now in my life. Has been met a lot of my LGBT friends and welcomed them and loved them and accepted them and affirms them and wouldn't try to change them.
That's
for
awesome.
So
that's great. So one of my favorite chapter titles is Jesus in Drag. Can you talk about that chapter a little bit?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's my favorite chapter in the book, because it's actually the only chapter in the book that I wrote during the year. I went through this experience and it hit me so hard that I was like, I've just got to write this. Now, initially when I started the the experiment, for lack of a better term, I was just planning on journaling it. I didn't have any notion of writing or publishing a book. I wasn't trying to become famous, contrary to what some people on the internet think. Which, by the way, you're not going to become famous writing a book, no matter how well it does, unless you're J.K. Rowling or something. But I was journaling this stuff, and I realized one day that I knew I wanted to share it in a bigger way, but I didn't have any idea of how I was going to do that. So by the time the situation happened in Jesus and Drag, I was solidly, okay, I'm going to write this story for other people too. And I was working at Revive Cafe, I believe it was June 2009, and I still had some issues at that point. I had overcome what I would consider to be my fear of LGBT folks and the labels that were ascribed to them, and the stereotypes I had learned about them in church and that kind of stuff, because I had developed so many friendships and stuff. But the question of are gay and Christian mutually exclusive terms was still something I was really wrestling with. And attached to in the neighborhood, you'll notice this is a trend. Everything is attached to everything. Next door to the cafe that I was working at, there was a community center. And I walked outside on a break one night, smoking a clove cigarette. That makes me feel old. And I heard a song playing that I didn't recognize, or I recognized, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And I knew that they were having karaoke that night. So, but I was standing there. What is that song? What is that song? For some reason, it just felt like it wasn't supposed to be hearing that song. And I walked in through the first set of doors into this, room, into the what do they call lobby of the community center. And I heard the song louder, still couldn't understand the words coming out of the mic. And so I walked through the second set of double doors. And when I got inside, I looked up on stage, and there was, at the time, Jesus and Drag is a misnomer. She was transgender, but in my mind, it was, essentially the same thing as a drag queen, a man dressed in a woman's clothing, and dressed like a young Barbara Bush with a pink skirt and big gold pearls and a perfect hair and great heels, and on stage singing. And she got to the chorus, and all of a sudden it snapped, it clicked. She started saying, or she was singing, "Our God is an awesome God," which, is a classic praise song.
Yeah.
And I looked around the room, and everybody had their hands raised, and they were worshiping. And I felt this flood of the Spirit kind of hit me, and my jaw just dropped. And I wanted it to be a fluke. Was waiting for the song to end, and I wanted to hear something from Lady Gaga or Britney Spears or Cher, any of my stereotypical songs that I associated with, gay men singing or lesbian women singing. And sure enough, the next song was another praise song, and then another, and my jaw was just hanging, my mouth couldn't close. Then a guy walked over to me, and he said, "Oh, hey, you're here for karaoke?" And I said, "I was just checking it out. I work next door." And he said, "Oh, don't mind the Jesus music. We all go to church together, and when she gets up on stage, sometimes we just break out and start singing praise songs. I hope that's cool." And I felt like in that moment, this tearing of the curtain, so to speak, that realized that gay and Christian were not mutually exclusive terms, that the same Spirit that I felt in my own times of worship was the Spirit that I was experiencing in that room at that time. And that was the moment I realized that I had to put down that idea of exclusivity in my faith, and believing that labels could separate me from Jesus.
Yeah.
The Bible says nothing could separate you from the love of God, but I didn't believe that, apparently.
Yeah.
And so it was one of the top 3 most profound life-changing experiences that I've gone through. So I went home and I wrote the whole thing out, and I wanted to call the book Jesus in Drag.
Mm-hmm.
And my publisher just said, listen, you're trying to reach conservative believing people with an alternative viewpoint to what they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people only listen to conservative media outlets. And if you call it this, there's no way you're going to be able to share your story on these platforms. And so editor said, well, what about the cross in the closet? And I said, okay, we'll go with that. That's perfect. But yeah, I think I've still got a picture somewhere. I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah.
If I can find it. A picture of that exact moment. Because before she got off stage, I pulled out my little 3 megapixel camera phone and took a picture. So
that's awesome.
I'll always think about that.
That's great. Did you find being in the community that there were a lot of LGBT people who had a hard time with Christianity because of trauma?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and when I visited different states, it was a lot more pronounced. I lived in the Bible Belt, and there's a church on every corner. Yeah. Church is as much part of a culture, as politics down in the South. Yeah. So, so a lot of, and most of the people that I was spending time with had been raised in the church. Were very, very much believers themselves. A lot of them had to overcome the trauma and the hurt caused by people professing the name of Christ to them.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. I mean, I found a lot of friends that were actually theologically more conservative than I was on certain things. People that believed in a literal 6-day creation, stuff like that I never would have imagined I'd find.
Yeah.
And then the atheists that I've met and the people, I think there are a lot of people who are agnostic or atheist because they legitimately don't believe. There are a lot of atheists and agnostics I've met who don't believe because of past trauma, of the ignorance that they experienced around them from religious friends or family, or hurt caused by religious people. But by and large, I find that the majority of LGBT folks that I meet are religious in one way or another. I've got friends who are Muslim and lesbian, which there's an amazing author named Irshad Manji who talks about, she's a lesbian Muslim woman. She goes on CNN and debates imams, and she's got a book called Love, Allah, and Liberty. And then I forgot the main one, the first one I was exposed to about her. But she's absolutely a pit bull in all the right ways and awesome. She lives up in Canada right now. But I don't know. I tend to meet more people just naturally who have some kind of faith system than not. Unless I'm out in Oregon, in which case it's the other way around.
So it's been all these years, and clearly you've met a lot more people. You do this, you travel, you speak. Do you speak mainly about that journey?
So initially, yes. The first few years after the book came out, I was speaking at a lot of college campuses and churches and conferences that wanted to hear somebody who had kind of walked in both worlds, and a pastor who was affirming, who had a non-affirming congregation would often bring me in. I've been in churches where they were on the fence about whether or not they were going to become gay affirming as a church or not, and wanted me to come in and speak to their congregations. That was initially it. In 2015, I was given the opportunity to do a TED Talk in Greece on the island of Syros. And which was amazing
Yeah.
in every possible way. But the Greek Orthodox Church, while they're socially less religious, almost kind of like Italy too, they're very socially liberal, but they're still operating off of the dogma of the dominant religion in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess in Athens, it was kind of a big controversy. And so the people organizing the event were college students. So they thought, well, we can ruffle some feathers for the event and we'll bring this guy out. And at that point, I realized, okay, well, this isn't just an audience of conservative Christians or LGBT folks. How can I distill the message and the things that I learned from my experience into a much broader topic? And I had always, written about in the book and after the fact about empathy and about intentional empathy. And so my TED Talk was on practicing intentional empathy. So I used my story as a vehicle to deliver that message that I felt was kind of more broadly applicable to people, or would be able to impact more people. And since then, with the exception of one event in Canada, a Human Library event where they specifically wanted me to tell my story, I've begun speaking more on the topic of empathy. In fact, the book I'm going to be working on October through December and finishing is the book Practicing Intentional Empathy. And I've written 2 versions of that book, and I've trashed both of them. The first time because Donald Trump became the president, and at that point I lost all empathy, as I think a lot of us experienced. And then the second time because I went through a divorce and realized that I didn't want to put out this message of empathy and be a hypocrite. I wanted to be as authentic as I could, and I wanted to also write the book in the context of somebody who's gone through those things and able to refer back to those things. So yeah, typically now empathy is the topic, because I feel like that's kind of the lifeblood of a thriving culture and society.
Yeah. You mentioned in an interview that you expected to be, I guess, welcomed like Jesus when you came out to like your Christian friends. And then you didn't experience that, but you did experience it from the LGBT community. So did that change your version, seeing it in a new way? Did it change your version of how you saw Jesus?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Jesus, by his character, tends to always err on the side of the oppressed, not the oppressor. I mean, he was very much a radical figure that almost single-handedly toppled an empire. And I think the reason that people, even my atheist friends, love the Sermon on the Mount, for example. Have a deep, profound respect for the words of Jesus, the words in red. And I think that I had always been given the empire version of Jesus, and I had not ever been introduced to the servant, not vigilante. What's the word? I mean, the guy that was swimming against the stream, that was siding with the oppressed, and that was very much a side of Yeshua that I had never met and was thrilled to meet. Because I feel like, kind of personality-wise, I'm naturally prone to instigate things. I'm not afraid of confrontation.
Yeah.
It's made for some interesting experiences. But the Jesus the Jesus I know now, I don't seek in a church building. I seek on the farm, when I'm working on my family farm, when I'm out in nature, when I'm speaking to friends and having heart-to-hearts with friends.
Yeah.
And the fellowship I get from that has been a balm for my soul. I still think I have a certain level of almost a PTSD from my religious experiences and from that year. I've also gotten older and wiser and started realizing how intricately connected religion and politics seems to be, and that is off-putting. So it's very much more personal and relationship driven now than it is communal and social.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's important. It's all about relationship, and our pastor at our church has been like talking about like breaking the spirit of religion and how Jesus was and how what we interpret in the Bible of women aren't supposed to be speaking in the church is totally wrong. And he proves that by Jesus sitting next to the woman at the well, or by Jesus having Mary Magdalene come along with him. All of that was culturally not acceptable, but he did it anyways. And I just think it's so important because
hadn't she been married 5 times?
Yeah, something crazy. She was it was totally wrong for him to do that in that time. And he was showing us something, and religion and has just done a terrible job of painting the picture of who Jesus actually was and is. And I'm really lucky to.
Well, I think the.
Oh, no, you're good. I just feel really lucky to be under a pastor who is not afraid to preach these things that they need to be spoken on, and they're important. So I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Not at all. There was a little bit of a lag for a second, and I thought you were. So I think one of the more enlightening experiences I've had since the book came out was I went and spoke at 2 conferences in Rome, May-ish of 2013. And the first conference was at a high school, and the second conference was at the first Protestant church ever built in Rome.
Wow.
And a little chapel like carved out of stone. It was amazing. But one of the things that I did while I was there was I went and toured the Colosseum because I quote Maximus from Gladiator pretty much everything. And so I wanted to go see, and they happened to have a Constantine exhibit. And I had done some research on, Constantine bringing Christianity to Rome and making it the national religion of Rome, and why, and how he used the Christian faith to get people on his side so he could overcome the other 2 regional emperors and take it on for himself, and then offered all the once persecuted Christians, power and political authority and money. And I feel like, there's a quote, "The church is a whore, but she's my mother." I think it's St. Francis said that. And I think that was the moment I realized that the church and state jumped into bed together. And then that started unraveling everything after that for me, and the ways that power and money and influence and structure and buildings and 501c3s have learned the spirit of the movement of Christianity, organic Christianity, and not in all cases. I don't want to generalize completely here, but in my experience, I've visited many, many churches, and there are far more phony religious churches than there are Christ-following, Christ-honoring churches.
Yeah.
And that's very sad.
I mean, we live in the Bible Belt of Texas, and so it's it's only by God's grace and plan that we found a church that has me on a worship team and has baptized my daughter and dedicated my son. Like, that's not normal, and I'm excited for the day that more places like that, because for me, a house of worship is important, but every story I hear, the more I do the podcast, the more stories I hear, usually on TikTok, the more I'm just like, man, like, how do we fix this? Because it's a mess. And it breaks my heart to hear all the trauma stories. Like, I have my own trauma, but I'm also like super lucky. I know this isn't a normal thing. So it's just, how do we fix it?
Did you always live in Texas, or did you?
Yes, I grew up in Austin.
Did you grow up?
I grew up in Austin, Texas, and then we moved to Amarillo. So it's a little different. I just went to Austin last week, and I was like, man, this is way different. Now being married with 2 kids.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like I stick out less here.
McConaughey is going to be the... I think Matthew McConaughey is going to take over Texas with Joe Rogan. It's gonna be... But I've never been to Austin. I spent some time working in Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've got family out there. I've done some speaking engagements out there, and recently took a road trip that'll be in my next book through Texas and stopped in Amarillo. So I went to the Big Texan and I went to pawn shops there. Got camera equipment and stuff. It was a blast. But
that's awesome. Did you like the Big Texan?
Cool place. I did actually. I mean, I didn't get the challenge steak. Part of me wanted to, but no, I couldn't do that. But no, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a good time. It wasn't the best steak of my life or anything, but it was an experience and a really cool environment. And I still drink out of the plastic cup from the Big Texan with all the records and stuff on it. But every time I see somebody going there, I've been there. I love that place. So.
Yeah, it's a really cool environment. I would agree, not the best steak, but I'm picky about steaks, so I don't know. So talking about empathy, I don't want to take too much of your time. My whole goal with the podcast is not just to help LGBT people know that Jesus loves them, but also to help church people know that Jesus loves us. And how, as a straight person who went through this whole experience, how could you, what could you say, what do you have to say to both sides of having more empathy, really for the straight side to have more empathy for the LGBT? How can they, advice that you could give them to better love and understand that Jesus does love us?
I think the first step in that is understanding each other and people, every human on this planet, no matter what background, what country, what region, what economic class, whatever, every single person shares in common this need for otherness, to love and to be loved, and to be respected and to be affirmed. And there are a lot more similarities between us than differences. Ultimately, those things are so huge and so profound in making us who we are as human beings that we sometimes that it overshadows the minutia, like political this, political that, this denomination versus that denomination, Protestant, Catholic, atheists, Christian. So I think the first thing I would say is, as much as people may have hurt you, or you may be against them, or you may disagree vehemently on 99% of life, there's still more things that are similarities between you and that other than there are differences. And once I realized that changed how I interact with everybody, because I understand that if you speak to those core desires and needs to love and be loved and to show respect, that oftentimes, no matter what people believe, they will return that same thing in kind. As far as that specific question of Christians that are still anti-gay and LGBT folks that are have been so hurt by Christianity, or have seen so much hurt perpetrated by religion that they're against it. First, to the LGBT people, I would say everybody is on a journey, and they're walking that journey at that pace. The same way, if I went out and you and I were trying to see who could walk a mile the fastest, you're going to beat me. There's no question. Long torso, short stubby legs, 300 pounds. Down from 360 pounds, but still 300 pounds.
There you go. Good job.
Thank you. And so, just in the same way that some people are more physically able to do something in a more expedient way, a lot of us, there's mental, emotional, intellectual fitness inherent to all of us. And different people are at different levels. And if somebody like me, who is super dogmatic, who's the type that you would see at Pride Day, standing on a 5-gallon paint bucket with a megaphone, if that was who I was before, and I would be able to go from that to where I'm at now I truly believe that every single person is capable of changing and evolving and coming to a more broad awareness of God's children. And I think that the only thing that is going to bring that out of conservative religious people is to experience love from the people that they are against or don't agree with. So, I mean, I encourage all of my LGBT friends that where it's emotionally, mentally safe for them to do so, to seek out and live in that tension with those people, to go to churches that are a little bit more conservative sometimes. If they haven't been traumatized, if it's not a trigger, because, I don't know the exact statistic, but I mean, even conservatives who have gay or, lesbian, bisexual, transgender loved ones or friends are a certain percentage more likely to vote for equality and not be against them, even if they still hold a pretty conservative theological perspective. So yeah, everybody is on their journey, and you can't rush people on that. Now, you can expect certain things, like we have a certain social contract, like an unspoken agreement that, you're gonna, if I give you this money, you're gonna bake me a damn cake, So that kind of discrimination, not cool with me. But
yeah,
if somebody just specifically holds a belief that it goes against what I believe, and it isn't used to harm other people directly, then I would say just give them time, love them, and walk them through that process if you're able to, and pray for them. Send out positive vibes, whatever it is that you want to do. To the conservative Christians, I always encourage them to rededicate themselves to getting to know the Jesus of the Bible, to read the words in red, see what he doesn't say, because sometimes what isn't said is as important as what is said. And the sheer amount of times that love your neighbor and things like that, take care of each other, is promoted in the scriptures, is vastly outnumbers the things that it is purportedly against. And then the other thing that I try to do is and not being a biblical scholar myself, but having done quite extensive research specifically on this topic, because I knew I would be interacting with those conservative people, having a foundational understanding of how the clobber passages aren't actually relevant or don't apply, or what the actual context is in those situations is huge. So perfect example, not to rabbit trail, but Sodom and Gomorrah. If I'd always use that growing up, because I saw that on the felt board with those felt asteroid pieces, and hearing that it's to destroy the sexual immorality and the gay people, and now I know that, hey, if I go to Ezekiel 16, it tells me exactly why Sodom was destroyed. That's how it happened, because of their prosperous ease and lack of care for the other and their neighbor, and which sounds a lot more familiar as the more I live looking around the U.S. But so I think we just all have to have patience, and we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the people, especially the people that dislike us or hate us or are against us or that disagree with us, and understand that our perspective is our perspective, and we believe our right, and they believe they're right, and they believe that they're they're honoring God. I try to be gentle but firm in those situations with conservative believers.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
There's a very long answer. I hope I answered your question.
No, I liked everything you said. It was good. That was something when we came into our church, like I sat down with my pastor before I even sang worship, and we talked about where the church was going to go, but it did have to take time, because you just can't throw it all on someone. And it was all my whole goal was always just loving people and letting the Holy Spirit do the rest, because I'm going to mess it up. I'm always, if it's me and my emotions, they'll get the best of me. So just trusting that process and loving people through that. And not that it's easy. We just went through some hard stuff, but it always.
Well, acting as opposed to reacting always tends to be the smarter course of action. And I'm not great at it myself a lot of the time, but I try either.
Ask my kids. Acting, what is it, responding? Or
see, now I don't have any kids yet, so
That's a hard thing to do. Well, I'm so thankful for your time. I'm so thankful for your book. I don't know, I know you don't know this, but Confessions from the Closet, the title came from Cross in the Closet. And
oh, wow.
I loved the book so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Wait, let me grab this thing that fell off the ground. I was going to say, it's part of the cool thing about getting published and having a book is when you get to share that book with people in other languages. And the two that most people haven't gotten to see are there's the Chinese version.
Wow.
And then the Hungarian version, which says 18 and up, I guess, because I use profanity and talk about drinking and smoking cloves.
Yeah.
But so, it's
That's
been
awesome.
An interesting experience there. But I'm so, I saw your post about the book, and every time I see something like that, it's just so humbling, because as an ally, I know my job is not to usurp the voices of the people I'm trying to work and advocate for.
Mm-hmm.
It's to walk beside them or take my cues from them or take my orders from them and figure out the best way for me to help them in whatever way I can and it's been an act of penance almost for me for the first 20 years of my life, where I was just I say in the book, a Bible banging homophobe type, to now I want to have that Saul Paul transformation, that Damascus moment. So but I was very humbled by your post, and I was like, I'm gonna add you on Facebook. Message you right now.
I was so thankful. I was excited. Your book means everything to me. I really encourage everyone listening or watching to get the book. I'll link it in the show notes, because it did change my life, and I just think we could all.
If they want an autographed copy, I've got a box under my bed right now. So they just private message me on Facebook or tweet at me and get in contact, and I can tell them how to do that too. But it is available on Amazon. And
I'm pretty sure that's where I got it.
And Kindle.
Amazon. All those years ago. So. Thank you for going through that journey and being brave enough to walk in our shoes as much as you could and to share it. I'm so glad you shared it, because it wouldn't have been the same. And I know impacted my life and my mom's life, and I'm sure so many others. And I am glad that it can continue to change people's lives. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and just everything that you're helping me with. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And I really appreciate the opportunity and to talk to you. It's nice to talk to people in the pandemic era.
Yeah.
Even, video chatting. I would tell your mom I said hello.
I will. She'll listen.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Mom.
She'll be
I'll see you in Amarillo. We'll go to a better steak joint when I'm out there.
There you go. You got to let us know. It'll be exciting.
Absolutely.
So everyone, thank you so much for listening and watching.
I've got to meet your wife and kid.
You do need to watch them or meet them. Sorry, excuse me. There is a little bit of a lag happening. I'm catching it too. But my wife's super excited that I got to do this tonight. She knows how much it means to me. So again, thank you. But everyone listening, I really appreciate y'all's time as always. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And be sure to check out Cross in the Closet, because it is a game changer for sure. Till next week, have a great one.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to my mom's podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give this video a big thumbs up. Also, thanks for your comments and your feedback. Hey guys, thanks. Hey guys, thanks for listening to my podcast. Oh gosh.